Birds and nerd. Oh my god. Imagine sitting down and the first thing I see in chat. Thanks, Jupiter. Alright. Kikoimashita. Ohayo Tori. Welcome to Tabletop Tuesday. Today we're going to be looking at 5th edition, the very, very popular and most recent edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I've oh Jesus, it hit Tenandayo. But we see you, we hear you. Excellent. Good to see all of you. Man, I feel like there's more people here than usual. Looks like everybody's as hype about this as I am. God, where was I? Oh yeah. So D&D 5th edition is the most popular form of Dungeons & Dragons right now. And by Roll20 statistics, it's, I think, the most popular tabletop system, just period. Though Pathfinder 2nd edition, pretty close behind it. And I guess Starfinder's up there too. Though my personal experience with those two are way more limited. DM gang turn up. You know, in my server, I have a chat called the Forever DM Crying Corner. I like to stare at it a lot. It's what we do. All right, so we won't waste too much time. I intend this to be a 2-hour stream, but I suspect I won't be able to get through everything I'd like to, which is why this is labeled Part 1. So we'll go ahead and start with what D&D is, because 5e is good. 5e has issues, but a lot of it can be worked around with like how simple the rules are. Several of my my IRL group here, we have issues with how a lot of the errata has been written. Like, you know, things like not being able to take more than one bonus action in a turn doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I mean, balance-wise, sure. Classes like monks and paladins would be absolutely bonkers if that were a thing. But those classes are already bonkers for totally different reasons. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of issues I have with the difference between the flavor and the mechanics. But that's one of the things I want to talk about. So for those who have never played D&D, D&D specifically stands for Dungeons and Dragons, though a lot of people will say D&D as kind of a blanket statement for any tabletop role-playing system, which is very unhelpful because sometimes you'll get somebody who's like, hey, you want to play D&D? And you're like, yeah, I do want to play D&D. And they're like, cool, here's a giant book on Pathfinder. Good luck. Those were the days. Who follows the rules? People who play the game. Is your IRL group just a bunch of chickens and ducks? No, they're actually a bunch of rats and lizards. Imagine that. Homebrew goes homebrew is something that I'll get on later. So D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to be the most correct, anytime somebody talks about D&D, they are specifically referring to Dungeons and Dragons. And more often than not, they're probably talking about 5th edition. 5th edition is not actually the 5th edition of D&D. It's actually the 6th. As there was, you know, 1st edition, then there was D&D Advanced and 2nd edition, which are more or less the same thing. Then there was 3rd edition, which was pretty popular. But then there was 3.5, which a lot of people consider to be just the same thing as 3rd edition. It's just better in every way. And it is highly regarded as like the most popular form of D&D, though anybody who says that is generally looking through rose-tinted glasses. 20 stat normal max. Well, let's not get into that. There was 4th edition, which was very poorly received. I have my own personal complaints with it, though I will say my very first campaign that I ever ran was a 4th edition campaign, and it went off beautifully. We had 2 GMs across 12 players and 14 total player characters. It was a chore, but it was fun, and that's what D&D is supposed to be. And then there was 5th edition, which totally rewrote all of the rules to be very, very simple. Now that simplicity comes at a cost. A lot of fans of Pathfinder and 3.5 complain that 5th edition simplicity does this thing where it removes a lot of what you were previously capable of doing, which is true. There's not like built-in rules for gestalting. A little late, but I made it. What's up, Wim? Yeah, there's not rules for things like gestalt. There's not a lot of prestige classes. Archetypes in 5th edition are pretty awful. There's not a lot of reasons you would take them. And so now your archetype is more or less built into your class rather than the idea of multi-classing. Though that said, multi-classing in itself is way cooler in 5th edition. Me personally, I prefer 5th edition because of its simplicity. It's really easy to just pick up and run, and it's very, very easy to teach, which is why I wanted to bring it up here in stream. So we're 8 minutes in. We haven't even really discussed what's going on. So D&D, any D&D, is what's called a D20 base system. What that means is that for pretty much every single roll, you're going to need a 20-sided die. And you're probably familiar with what one of those looks like. However, D&D in particular uses almost every kind of die. And so we'll briefly go over what those look like. Let me switch into... Bam! Here we go. Oh no, the chat. Give me a second. Let me see if I can find a way to fix this. Who knew white text on a white background would look terrible? Let's see. Edit stream time. Dashboard. That's unlucky. Okay. Maybe what I can do is something like this. Visuals. Yeah. You know, I thought it wouldn't look that bad. When I first did this, Warhammer 40k, 40D tank rolls. Don't talk to me about 40k. Listen, I played Tau, and it was a good time. And then I got out of 40k because it was ruining my wallet's life. Yeah. Yeah. All right, there we go. That's way better. Okay, sweet. Pretty scuff, and it cuts off my... okay, I don't know if I'm cool with this. Let me do something about this. Oh, whatever. You know what? We'll deal with it. And this works for other reasons. Now, oh no, he's a... You know what? Listen. At my gaming store, there were too many Space Marine players. All right? If I have Strength 10 AP 1... then all I have to do is hit and you die. It's that easy. Get those land raiders out of my sight. Get those freaking... I can go on about this forever. Maybe one day we'll do a regular tabletop, like a miniature stream, but for now we're gonna stick on D&D. So like I said, D&D is a D20 base system, and here we are. Oh, by the way, if it wasn't already obvious, I'm using Roll20 as a host for all of my D&D needs. This stream is not sponsored. However, I have been given permission. The superior walk. Get. Oh God. Can I ban a mod in my chat? Hold on. This is important, guys. Give me a second. Hold on. There we go. Okay. All right, we did it. So this is the oh, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh no. Okay, well, so like I was going to say, D&D uses every type of dice. So starting up here, we have the D20, the D12, then the D10, the D8, D6, and D4. Not all of these are used evenly. The D20 is used the most, probably followed by the D8 and then the D6, and then the remaining ones are sort of kind of tossed in there. Not shown here is a D100, but a D100 is literally just a D10, except with bigger numbers on it. So if you ever hear somebody talk about a percentile die, what it is that you take a D100 and a D10 and you roll them together. Alternatively, you can take just two D10s and roll them together and just designate one of them to be, 10 times higher. And that's how you would roll percentile. Are we playing Yu-Gi-Oh? God. Oh boy, this is going to be a long stream. Good gracious. Okay. So, to get back on track, D&D is a D20 based system. There are other systems that are D6 based, like Stars Without Number, which you would roll just a ton of D6s to do everything that you need. There are other D10 and D12 based systems, more or less. If you hear somebody talking about, a value and then using that as a base, it's literally the basis of that system. But we're going to stick on 20s, and we're going to talk first about the character sheet. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to make ourselves a new character sheet. Yeah, sure. I literally thought that this said IB Lestrunk. Okay. Oh, this is Fantasy Monopoly. Yeah, basically. So we're going to talk about the character sheet. This is the official D&D 5th edition character sheet. You'll probably see a lot of these at like conventions and stuff. There are other versions, but I like this one the most, not only because it's easy to just reference everything that you need that's important, but also it's, it's just the most commonly used. So over here at the top, we have the character name. Obviously we have D&D. You have your class, which we can kind of get into that later. The subclass, which again is more or less an archetype. Your character level, the character race, sub-race. We'll talk about that. Is this how you play backgammon? Riley, I swear. You guys, what have I done? What is your problem? Why is it like this? Okay. So moving forward, we have inspiration. Inspiration is unique to D&D 5th edition. It's basically something that your DM rewards the player with. Are you ever going to stream a campaign? Absolutely. I don't want to spoil the end of the stream, but I will be announcing a campaign that I'm going to be running. So don't put your panties in that, but it's happening. It's happening. But anyway, inspiration is more or less a gift that your GM gives to a player. And it does a number of things. It can allow you to re-roll a roll that you have made, more or less regardless of what happens. It allows you to force an enemy to re-roll. And it's also something that you can just sort of give to another player. Now, that's what it does mechanically, but I choose to sort of add different rules to it. The way that you get inspiration is more or less up to the GM. Some GMs will say if you make them laugh with like an amusing enough scenario or good role playing or just generally doing something super cool, A great example would be if you are a ranged character and you're listening to the big bad evil guy start monologuing, and above him is the big glass chandelier. You can say, "Hey, GM, if I shoot the chandelier hard enough, like with my super bow, could I get him to walk forward and then get impaled on it?" And the GM might think, yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, go ahead and make an attack roll and get inspiration for it because it's a cool thing to do. Now, not every GM will do this, and it's in very poor taste to constantly ask, "Hey, can I get inspiration for this? Can I get inspiration for this?" That's a very fast way to just not ever get inspiration. Also, Unluckily, the Bard class has a very similar mechanic which they can gift to players. Imagine forgetting to give your players inspiration. I cannot count the number of times I've gone so far out of my way to like do something that's definitely detrimental to my character, but is something that they would do, and the GM's like, okay, I guess, and then they just move on. It's like, come on, you know, let's give it to me. No, I swear, inspiration is a very forgotten mechanic, but personally, I feel like it's very core to how you're basically supposed to play 5th edition. So moving on from that, we have armor class. Armor class, shortened to AC, is more or less how hard it is to hit you. Whenever you roll to hit an enemy, or an enemy rolls to hit you, they roll a 1d20 plus their various attack bonuses, plus some other bonuses or minus some other negatives, and they have to meet or beat your armor class. Some GMs, actually many GMs, will rule that for player characters, meeting it, an enemy has to beat it. So if you have an AC of 16, I would have to get a total of 17 or higher to hit you. Other GMs will just say meet or beat is good. Well, at least good for them. But armor class does not necessarily mean how hard it is to hit you. I choose to think of it as something closer to how hard it is to deal meaningful damage to you. And this can open up a lot of opportunities. A lot of people like to flavor, you know, oh, they just missed me. But, you know, let's say you're kind of an armored character, and you have heavy plate mail, and you have a sword and shield, and your AC is 18. Your shield gives you 2 AC. So that would mean that if somebody hit you with a 16 or a 17, hi, I'm a rogue. Okay, DJ. Yes. Rogues very commonly dodge things, but there is other ways to flavor this. But going back to the example, since your shield gives you +2 AC, if an enemy gets 17 to hit you, that's not quite enough. But instead of saying you just backflip out of it, because that would be kind of weird wearing plate mail, you could say, I bring up my shield and knock their weapon away. Or it just bounces off your armor. Regardless of the circumstances, the enemy just didn't do damage to you. They didn't break your armor class, and thus they don't have to roll damage. But there's a number of ways you can go about it. In going with the rogue idea, where you have 19 or 20 AC, wearing essentially just some clothes or rags, you can say that you do like a double backflip and you know, a swan dive midair. Or you can, you know, if you're a melee rogue that wields 2 daggers, you can parry, or, you know, more or less you can make the combat more exciting than I stab, I dodge, and what. If I invest everything on dexterity, will I be stupidly agile? Maybe not stupidly so, but you will be quite agile. We'll get into the mechanics of how you calculate AC later. Right now, we're just going to go through the character sheet. You backflip and the Demon Lord just fucking explodes. Well, maybe. Initiative. Initiative determines how fast you go in the turn order. It only really matters for the first turn, and then initiative doesn't really change after the first round. It's a good way to think about initiative is how prepared your character is for combat. Now, that doesn't mean you'll get huge bonuses if you look at the big bad evil guy and think, this guy's gonna stab us. It just means that while you may not be surprised that combat is happening, your party members and or the big bad evil guy can move way faster than you for reasons that may not be entirely clear. Or just perhaps the way your character thought something was going to happen didn't, and thus you're a little slower on the draw. Speed indicates your ground speed. Now, several characters can fly, several characters can swim, and some characters can dig underground. And all of those have unique speeds. We'll get into that later. But generally, speed indicates your land speed. Over here, we have a list of quirks of your character. Every background package will give you usually a set of skills, a fancy feature, and it will let you fill in all of these boxes, which on the top we have personality traits, then we have ideals, bonds, and flaws. These are things that aren't necessarily set in stone, but more or less kind of indicate where your character comes from. For example, the Sage background, which is one of my favorites to take. You know what else 5e sneak attack has done? It doesn't have to be advantage. If you have an ally, if there is an enemy of your enemy in melee range, you still get sneak attack. Even if you don't have advantage. The only stipulations of sneak attack, depending on your archetype, is you can't have disadvantage. That's like the big thing. You can otherwise argue to have advantage, and plus advantage is pretty easy to get when you're a rogue, because you get cunning action at level 2. But sorry, I actually brought water with me this time. Okay. Every character gets 2 personality traits, 1 ideal, 1 bond, and 1 flaw. And regardless of what background you choose, it is up to the player and the GM to sort of work together and really determine if it fits you. So if you take a background that you think is fitting for you, but you don't like any of the things that it gives you, I mean, feel free to ring up your GM and be like, hey, you know, is it cool if I take the personality traits and stuff from this background and otherwise take this one? Like I know a common one that some people take are, they'll take the soldier background, but maybe their character is retired from the military and they've kind of been left destitute because they lost the war. And so they'll take background, or they'll take the personality traits and stuff from the urchin background to sort of give this idea that they're homeless, they're pretty destitute, but they're still a soldier. So you can mix and match these, and I think that can really, really bring a character to life. Moving over to the left here, we have hit point maximum and current hit points. HP is about as standard as it gets in any game. However, D&D treats HP in kind of an abstract way. When you take damage, it doesn't necessarily mean you've been stabbed or mortally wounded. There's not actually a clear-cut answer to how to think about HP. I choose to treat HP as stamina. When your HP reaches 0 in D&D 5th edition, you don't die. You go unconscious and start bleeding out. Which means that if you have like 50 HP and you get hit for 49, it's not quite that, you know, somebody ripped your freaking arm off. That is an appropriate amount of damage for something like that to happen. But I mean, it could be that you just got like whacked in the head with a baseball bat, you know, just something that hit you so hard that got you reeling so badly that you are on the verge of passing out. Making custom backgrounds is literally in the book. Yes, the player's handbook does encourage making custom backgrounds. There are also a number of ways to do so. And I myself am definitely a fan of doing something like this. However, I have seen a lot of homebrew backgrounds that are pretty insane. I have definitely heard of people saying, oh, I'm playing a revenant and my background feature is every time I die, I reincarnate. That's a little bonkers. Now, if it's appropriate for your GM, that's fine. I once ran a 5th edition game where all the player characters were significantly more powerful than standard D&D classes. Actually, DJ was in that game. It was a Final Fantasy XIV flavored game, and I basically rewrote all of the classes to have custom abilities that were insanely powerful because I wanted the players to feel like they were powerful. So, I mean, if more or less, if you think something might be a little on the yabai side, just ask your GM. They will know what is most suited for the insane OP homebrew is the best. I definitely disagree. I prefer players to be a little on the weaker side up until about level 12 or so, just to really get the whole hero's journey thing going. But I like those kinds of stories. Just came in to say hi. Hello, Carrot. This sword does 2d 100 damage. Nice. But 2d 100 damage is just gonna be like 10, right? You're gonna roll a 1 and a 9. Oh man. But yeah, HP is not a direct means of like your vitality. It's just more or less your ability to stay conscious. And this can also open up a lot of different ways to flavor healing abilities. I mean, it's not like the Spirit of Life just gets punched into your chest to bring you back up. I mean, I have flavored things that way. But it could be something as like a magical bead of force is sort of washed over you, or maybe a cleric splashes holy water. There's a bunch of different ways to go about it. Or even, a paladin using like their lay on hands to bring you back up from unconsciousness. Maybe what it is that they like literally grab you and they're like, hey, come on, man, you can't just stay down, and then you like suddenly wake up. There's a bunch of different ways to go about it. So moving over, we have our saving throws. We're going to look at that in a little bit. First, we're going to look at proficiency bonus. Now, D&D 5e has this. It's unique to D&D 5e, but also Pathfinder 2nd Edition also has this. Proficiency is essentially your character's ability to just do things. Whenever you're called trained in a skill or a saving throw or a tool, sorry, not trained, proficient. That's what I meant to say. When you are considered proficient with a saving throw, skill, tool, weapon, why isn't there a simp button? Let me simp. Okay, I'm actually going to briefly deviate. So I made a big boo-boo, and I basically need to fix my donation buttons, or else bad things are going to happen. So I've temporarily removed them for the time being. They'll come back soon enough. Opinions on the item. There are a lot of items in 5th edition. You're gonna have to. I mean, if you're talking about the Holy Avenger, I think it's kind of funny that it's not considered an artifact, which means that technically any merchant could just have it. The most legendary sword for any paladin in existence, can just be at a local vending machine. It's unlikely, but it could be. Water ASMR. Sorry. But anyway, proficiency is just your character's ability to do things that they are otherwise considered proficient in. The one. No, I don't know. With the funny... What are you... Okay, whatever. So in previous editions of D&D, the way that you would rank up skills is that you would have to physically put skill points in, but every class had a unique way of counting skills, and then there were like a bunch of attribute modifiers, and then sometimes you would get more skill points on one level than you would on another, and it was a huge pain in the butt. So 5th edition decided to say, if you're proficient in something, you're proficient. And as your character levels up, it will automatically rank up. The things that you're already good at will rank up with you. So this prevents a bunch of like, for example, a rogue who's supposed to be really good at sneaking. In previous editions, you would have to constantly put points in stealth and hide and move silently, which was a huge investment of your character, because it means, the deck of many things, I've encountered it 3 times, and all but one of those times, everybody refused to use it, which was the right idea. Also, I guess my opinions on the deck of many things is that I'm glad it's there. I wish more DMs would use it, because a lot of those cards can make for really compelling campaign stories. I mean, if you get the death where like a CR10 Reaper just starts following you around trying to murder you, not only will your party be like, hey, sweet, free XP, but I mean, there's a lot of good storytelling that can come from that. Actually, the one time it did happen, I was playing a high seas game, and our captain had the deck of many things, and so we're in the final confrontation, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna pull the card, and we're like, no, captain, don't do it, and so he pulls the card, and then his soul is trapped on a different plane and nobody knows where it is. I doubt we'll ever play that campaign again, but if we ever did, that would be the thing that we do. The NPC turns evil. Yeah, I mean, I think the deck of many things is a lot of fun. Where was I? Okay, proficiency bonus. All right. So after proficiencies, we have our saving throws. Saving throws are quite a bit different from skill checks, and what they basically represent is your character's ability to resist something in a particular category. So if somebody is wrestling you, right? Well, no, that's a contested strength check. Okay, if someone is trying to shove you and like push you to the ground, you would make a strength saving throw to try and resist it. You know, if somebody lobs a grenade at you, or, you know, a wizard misplaces their fireball, or maybe they don't misplace it, maybe they just trust you, you would roll a dexterity saving throw to dodge. If you get poisoned or you drink a little bit too much at the tavern, it's a constitution saving throw, so on and so forth. So it's more or less your ability to just resist things that are happening to you. And then at the far left, in this column, we have our 6 attributes. In order, we have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I will go ahead and talk about these. Most of them are pretty straightforward, but when you get down to the quote-unquote social stats, the bottom 3, things can get a little dubious. And I have been in more than one argument about them. So strength is your character's raw physical strength. How much you can carry, how much you can lift, bro. All of that is determined by strength. Also, the vast majority of melee weapons hit, both roll to hit and get higher damage numbers based on how high your strength is. There are notable exceptions that are not few and far between, as several weapons are light enough to be used with dexterity instead, but a lot of the big chunky weapons, great hammers, great axes, anything about as large as a person, you roll strength. Dexterity is your character's agility. It doesn't necessarily affect your move speed, but it's how flexible you are. Whenever you have to do a task that is, you know, trying on the hands, you know, like playing Super Smash Brothers, you would roll dexterity. Trying to lockpick or, you know, throw a dagger. Things that aren't necessarily feats of strength, but otherwise require you to use your body in a specific way, would be dexterity. Constitution is your resilience. It's your physical resilience. Your HP goes up with a high constitution. The loot hammer. So yeah, your HP is affected by constitution. Your ability to resist, again, poisons, toxins, alcohols, diseases, all of that stuff, constitution. Most characters like to have a good constitution, but if your stats are like mediocre or average at best, a lot of ranged characters will sort of just hope that you don't get hit, which is a legitimate strategy. It's not awful to have a low constitution, but if your GM really doesn't like you or otherwise believes you experienced enough to know what's going to happen, you might want to invest some points in constitution. So then we get to intelligence. Intelligence is your character's ability to think on in a logical manner. And here's where things get complicated. For the physical attributes, your character can be as far removed from the player as the player wishes, which means that you can play a character that lifts, bro, even if you don't. That's not really hard to roleplay, because you can always describe, you know, their bulging muscles, yada yada. And the same goes for dexterity and constitution. Intelligence, however, is where things get weird. A lot of people who play characters with a low intelligence will play them like complete morons, which can be accurate, but I would say that intelligence is your character's capacity to learn rather than just how much they actually know. And you can see that all of these skills have an attribute kind of tied to them, and we'll get more into that here in a bit. But things like investigation, history, arcana, religion, nature, and your character's memory are more or less tied to your intelligence. So even if your intelligence is low, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means that the things that you think about don't tend to pan out on those kinds of like planes of thought. Maybe you just daydream often, you know? So I really dislike the argument that characters of a low intelligence basically can't do anything intelligent. Because, I mean, even people who eat crayons, a low whiz character... No, well, I have some pretty striking opinions on wisdom, too. Charisma is definitely the most contentious one, but we'll get to that. So, I mean, like I was saying, even people who sniff glue and eat crayons can once in a while decide that the red one is better than the green one, which isn't quite true, but, you know, personal experience and all. Wisdom is your character's experience. It's not quite... It's basically an amalgamation of everything that's happened to them up to now. I mean, you know, the great wise man is usually this old dude because, you know, they've been through a lot. Skills in wisdom are things like animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, and survival. Now, another way to look at wisdom is also your character's gut instinct. Charisma is broken. Charisma is not broken. It is just a stat that requires you to think a little bit harder. No. People who say that you can just spam persuasion and deception everywhere are not using charisma correctly. But wisdom is basically your character's gut instinct. And so you don't have, if you have a high wisdom, you don't have to be the old wise man who knows how to do everything. No, I mean, it's totally legit for someone like maybe a street rat to have a high wisdom. They've been living on the streets. They've got, you know, the guts and the know-how to you know, pick some pockets or who to feint and who not to. Again, it's a lot of instinctual things. Then we get to charisma, which is definitely the most contentious one. Charisma is not necessary. Charisma is basically the big social stat. A lot of people like to say it's like how attractive your character is or how well they speak. I don't think that's true at all. I view charisma as how willing other characters are to give you, you know, the time of day. I have definitely met a bunch of sorcerers who are total jerks because they should be. I mean, sorcerers are just extremely entitled wizards. And they walk around being like, "Oh, magic is so easy to me." Charisma being their casting stat, which also doesn't make any sense. But charisma being their casting stat means that they tend to be very social characters. So what ends up happening is a lot of sorcerers will be like, well, I have a high charisma, so therefore you like me. No. What it means is that I'm more willing to listen to you even if I hate your guts. And that can be for a number of reasons. And the big disconnect with charisma is a lot of people who play D&D aren't exactly as social as many social characters will be. And this is, again, kind of the big folly with the social stats in general. I don't like playing a lot of wizards because I don't think I'm very smart. Like, I don't think of... I think of things in a logical manner, but as far as, like, you know, scientific and purely logical knowledge goes, I'm not very good at playing those characters. So I just avoid it because I know that I'll run into a situation where my character is more intelligent than the player. And so me not being able to solve things in a unilateral way like my character would is not only breaking the experience for me, but also kind of runs the game down a little bit. I'm actually currently in a game where we have a sorcerer who's a total drug addict, and they are 900% sure that their magic is fueled by basically getting high, which I think is a funny way to go about it. But their character is as far from charismatic as possible, even though their charisma is like a 22, which is basically godlike, to put that in perspective. So me playing, a more level-headed character who is also quite arrogant, the reason I give this drug addict the time of day, even though I absolutely despise their way of life, is more or less because my character knows. One second. Charisma. What the heck? Wait, this is so bizarre. Your comment didn't show up in the live chat, but it did in the stream. All right, charisma as a casting stat is a big butt pull indeed. What makes sense? Makes sense for bards and warlocks. Warlocks are pretty special. Bards, now I would say bards should be an intelligence, or even wisdom. It could be charisma, but it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. It just depends on how you flavor your bard, but I would allow a bard to be an intelligence caster instead, or a wisdom caster instead of charisma. More or less because you could say that because they cast songs through their cast magic through their performances. Being a musician myself, a lot of performing is just remembering what you need to play at what time. It doesn't really matter how good your performance is, you don't need to sing your ancient ritual like a freaking diva, you just need to sing the right words. So I would not wholeheartedly, I don't think charisma should just be a casting stat at all, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, charisma is more or less everybody else's ability to pay attention to you. Always use intelligence as your dump stat. I mean, that is a way to go, but I mean, I personally like to dump strength because I play a lot of casters. So, we're going to briefly skip over the skills, and we're going to look at the hit dice. Hit dice is a purely mechanical thing. Every class has a dice of HP that whenever it levels up, you roll that dice or take the average of that dice in order to gain more HP. There are other ways that you can use hit dice, but the vast majority of the time, that's about all it does. Then we have death saves. Despite the name, death saves is not save. Well, I guess it is a save against death. The bird nerd likes to play a lot of casters. Raise your hand if you're surprised. Yeah, let me take a drink while everybody in the crowd. Delicious. I lied, it's not water, it's Kool-Aid. Who's surprised about that? Anyway, so death saves are really only important when your character drops to 0 HP. As I said before, when you drop to 0, you're not dead. You're more just bleeding out on the ground until somebody can come and help you. But there is a way that you can help yourself. Obviously, our bodies are capable of repairing themselves, and in D&D, player characters are insanely powerful compared to the average commoner. I play in a modern game, and man, we met some level 1 hobos. A single punch from that hobo would decapitate the average commoner, because level 1 is decently powerful compared to, a level 0 commoner, or a level 1 half, yada yada yada. But death saves are your ability to sort of resist just falling dead. The way it works is that you roll a 1d20 without any other modifiers unless you're playing with certain classes or you have certain abilities that say otherwise. And if you get above 10, you get a success. If you get a natural 20, you get all 3 successes and you're up with 1 HP. If you roll below a 10, you get a failure. You roll a nat 1, you get 2 failures. At 3 failures, you are dead. The only way to bring you back is through resurrection abilities or spells, or just rolling a new character. So that's when things get a little dicey. But D&D 5e has the record for the cheapest resurrection spell at character level 5 is the earliest that the cleric and the paladin, or the cleric and I think the druid, get the spell Revivify, which does take a good amount of gold to cast, but it's a way beyond permadeath. Now, if you make 3 successes without getting a natural 20, you're not up at 1 HP, you're at 0 HP, and you're just unconscious. And you will remain unconscious for 1d4 plus 1 hours. Or sorry, just 1d4 hours. Blah. Ugh, okay. So, now we're going to go over to the skills. And we'll talk about these a little bit. Wish time. Wish. Well, whatever. What a shame. So, from the top, we have Acrobatics. Pretty self-explanatory. Anytime you're doing, like, you know, if you want to play Assassin's Creed, like wall run or tightrope walk, you would roll something like Acrobatics. Animal handling is basically your natural empathy towards creatures. Like, you know, whenever you kneel down next to a dog and you're like, come here, puppy, you would roll animal handling. And I'd give you advantage if you actually said, come here, puppy, because it's cute and dogs are great. So next is Arcana, which is more or less just the skill to know things about magic. It might not tell you the answer to what things are, but it's a pretty good way. Like, if you're dealing with a puzzle in which a spell is involved, rolling Arcana will not give you the answer, but you might be able to use it to identify what kind of magic was used, which can very, very greatly narrow down more or less what happened. Athletics is the strength equivalent to acrobatics. If you're not a pussy boy that runs on tightrope and instead you just like to yeet yourself everywhere, it's an athletics roll. Deception is self-explanatory, or is it? Actually, it is not as self-explanatory as a lot of people think. Deception is not just a lie. It is any obfuscation of the obstruction of the truth. I guess obfuscation would also work, but either way, if you say something, for example, you know, let's say you're a rogue. I don't mean to pick on rogues, but yeah, I do. God. Anyway, let's say you're a rogue and you assassinate somebody. And a few days later, they go missing, you know, because they're dead. And you've hidden the body particularly well. And a town guard comes up and be like, hey, do you know what happened to this guy? If you answer with, oh, I just heard he got killed. That is true. He did get killed. But you are not saying a part of the truth where you killed him. That means you roll deception. If you leave out any part of the truth that your character knows they're leaving out, it is deception. There is a clear line between what is, like, half-truths don't exist in D&D. Well, they do, but they're deceptions. That's why it's not just called straight up lying. So if you're the type of person that speaks in half-truths, make sure you have a good deception, because you're going to be rolling it quite often. Now, characters a player can know something, but maybe their character doesn't, in which case it isn't a lie or a half-truth. If your character legitimately doesn't know, and I mean like legitimately, don't argue with your GM about semantics. Like, if there's no way they could have known, like perhaps the other players at the table know that this rogue assassinated somebody, but their characters weren't around for it. So if the same town guard asks, you know, the local fighter, hey, do you know what happened to this guy? No, I just heard he got killed. That's not a deception, because that character doesn't know what happened. He wasn't there for it. History is not necessarily world history, though it is commonly used that way. It's just your ability to remember things. anything that happened in the past is more or less, you know, a history roll. There are other uses for that skill, like for things like world history or, you know, perhaps recalling a legend or what have you. But more or less, I like to use it for memory. By the way, if you are the kind of player that doesn't take a lot of notes and you forget something, but you're pretty sure your character wouldn't have, I generally rule it as your character wasn't quite thinking about it at a given time, and so I'll have you roll history. So keep that in mind. What's next? Insight. Insight is a very commonly rolled thing. It's your character's ability to kind of feel something. Like, if they get bad vibes about a situation, you might roll insight to try and, like, sort your thoughts out. It's most commonly used to see if somebody is lying to you. Like, you know, say in the earlier example, the fighter goes up to the rogue, is like, hey, did you kill that guy? And the rogue's like, what? No, what? That's crazy. You might roll insight. Because you're sitting there squinting at the guy like, bro. But insight can be used for more than just that. Again, if you feel like maybe there's like an ambush, you're walking through a forest and things are eerily quiet, you might roll insight to kind of think like, well, you know, isn't this place like usually a little more busy? Like, why is it so quiet? You know, has that fog always been there? It's like a gut reaction. It's a pretty useful skill, and as you can see, it's tied to the wisdom attribute. Intimidation. Intimidation can be decently powerful, but only in sensible areas. Now, if you are a charisma-based character and you want to intimidate a lot of people, you need to be a little smart about it. Running up to a guard, being like, hey, I killed that guy, you're next, and rolling intimidation, they might not care because they're the guard, right? Their job is to take care of people like you. Even if you roll a natural 20, which is the highest you could possibly be, if they're not afraid of you, they're not afraid of you. That's just that. Like, you know, now rolling something like that and getting that high might unnerve them. But as is the case with a lot of charisma-based skills, getting a success doesn't mean you get what you want. You more or less get an intended effect. It just depends on what you follow it up with. Now, for example, in the same situation, say you go into that guard's house really late at night while they're sleeping, and you drag a dead body in their bed with them, and then you intimidate them. Yeah, they're probably afraid, right? That's a good way for that to work. But just running up to them in broad daylight, be like, hey, I'm gonna beat you up. Nah, not how that skill works. Next, we have investigation. Now, investigation and perception both constitute as looking for things, but they do so in very different ways. Perception is more or less your general ability to, well, perceive things, where investigation is you specifically looking for something. So where I might have you roll perception while walking through a busy, crowded street, to see if you can find some rumors about, you know, a missing person. If you say, I want to stop in at the tavern and ask the barkeeper, I'll have you roll investigation instead, because you are specifically going out of your way to look in a specific area with a specific goal. It's your ability to, or it's your character's ability to gather information in a very, like, localized area. After that, we have medicine. Medicine is mostly what it says on the tin, but it's also your knowledge of medicine. As you can see, it is an intelligence-based skill. Or sorry, it's a wisdom-based skill. It's more or less your ability to kind of understand like what works and what doesn't. So crafting things like healing potions is a medicine check. Getting someone from the bleeding state is a medicine check. But also, if somebody is talking to you about herbs, or maybe you want to look at some plants, you might roll medicine in order to try and understand it based on what properties it has and your experience with working with things similar to that. I should have gotten multiple glasses of water. I didn't think I'd be talking this much. Actually, I should have known better. So after that is nature. Nature can be pretty similar to medicine, as it is more often than not your ability to understand the natural world around you. If you wanted to identify specific plants, maybe not their effects, but like what they are, it's a nature check. To understand the general terrain of a given area is a nature check. And to identify if something is hidden inside of the terrain that you are traversing through is a nature check. You can also use this like a history check, where, maybe you're curious about some natural formations of rock that maybe form like an archway. I might have you roll nature to understand how old is it, how did it form, where did it form from, what kind of rock is it, yada yada yada. It is an intelligence-based skill. Is that plant's poison? That plant is a bear and it is angry. Well, Ravnica released a book about plant people, and well, it can happen. It can happen. I already talked about perception when talking about investigation, but to reiterate, it's the most used skill, which is why you have a thing right here called passive perception, or rather passive wisdom perception. It's just your ability to perceive the world around you. It is not limited to sight. Things like smell, touch, pretty much all of the senses can tie into perception. So even if you can't see something, if your character specifically has good smell, like you're playing a race that has like a really sensitive nose, you can be like, can I roll perception with a bonus because I have this ability that lets me smell really well? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Below that is performance. Performance is mostly used for what it says on the tin, but really any kind of presentation can constitute a performance. I often see this skill used when two characters that speak two different languages are trying to communicate to each other. Oftentimes, whenever you do things like sign language, or whenever you try and talk with a lot of body language, how well you present yourself is often what lets someone else sort of understand what you're trying to get at. And the sort of subtle nuances of nodding your head or kind of gesturing your arm this way or that way is often a performance check. So, it's not just related to art. There are other uses for it. Oftentimes, also, if you're trying to say a certain secret phrase that your character really doesn't know, but you're trying to get the gist of, you could roll a performance instead of a deception because you're just trying to make it sound good. So there are a number of uses for it. After that is persuasion, where deception is any kind of untruth. Persuasion is more or less your ability to make someone who doubts you, or not make someone, to suggest to someone who doubts you to reconsider. If you are telling the absolute truth, or if you are pleading to somebody like, I'm telling you, it's got to be this way. I saw a purple vent. You've got to believe me. You would roll persuasion. Unless you were totally lying, in which case you roll deception. These two do quite often go hand in hand, because persuasion is just is you trying to get someone to believe you. So you could roll deception, and maybe they like the information you gave them, they're willing to believe, but you yourself are still suspicious. So even though you pass the deception check, maybe you need to follow it up with a persuasion and be like, dude, I'm telling you, that's just how it is. So that would be a use of persuasion. After that is religion. Religion, much like nature and arcana and history, more or less, they're knowledge skills from previous editions. If you are a cleric and you do not have religion as a trained skill, that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't know anything about religion. You're just more or less focused on the thing that you do. You don't know about other religions or how religions have evolved over time, their history, their mythology, the texts, yada yada yada. You get the idea. Oh boy, we're almost done with skills. After that, we have Sleight of Hand. Sleight of Hand is the rogue's go-to thing, other than stealth, which is just below it. Sleight of Hand is more or less your ability to do like tricks with your hand. Things like flipping a butterfly knife in a fancy way, shuffling a set of cards in a way that might, rig the game, or really any kind of deception that involves like your hands. It's also the skill you roll to pickpocket and oftentimes to jig a lock, like purposely break a lock in a specific way. I mean, you could just break a lock by smashing it too. That's cool. But sleight of hand is your ability to kind of just subtly do something with your hands, or really just your body in general, without a lot of attention being drawn to it. And along the same line is stealth. Stealth is another skill that's commonly used incorrectly. You use stealth to either do something silently, or rather to do something without being noticed. However, if you are in broad daylight with nothing to hide behind, you cannot roll stealth to hide. I mean, you can, it just won't succeed. Because that would be the equivalent of you throwing like a bed sheet on top of yourself in the middle of town square, right? People are going to know that you're there. It doesn't matter how high you rolled. Maybe they won't know specifically where you are under that sheet, but you are under that sheet and they know that. So, oftentimes you want to roll stealth to hide behind something. You need to actually be behind something. A lot of the ways that I like to talk about stealth, I actually play like a maid character in another game who has a very, very good stealth. And the way that I flavor it is, rather than physically hiding from people, they're just very, very good at disappearing into the monotony of mundane like existence. I quite commonly roll stealth in broad daylight because I'm trying to make myself less noticeable. It's not so much that I'm hiding, it's just harder to pick me out of a crowd. And that's a good use of stealth, because I'm literally hiding behind, well, a crowd of people. But it's not like I'm invisible. And lastly is survival. Survival is your character's ability to survive out in the wild. If you are without food and you need to get food, you can roll to survival to hunt for things. If you pick up a plant and you're not very good at identifying them, you could roll survival or nature or medicine even to look at a plant and see like, well, this plant has purple roots on it. I think it's poisonous. That would be something that survival would tell you. It's not necessarily specific information, but it helps. And then we have the passive wisdom perception here. Now, passive skills are a thing in D&D 5th edition where if your GM feels like you've passed by something that's interesting, but the players aren't specifically looking for it, or rather the characters aren't specifically looking for it, then the GM might rely on a passive skill. Now, the way that you find a passive skill is it's 10 plus the modifier of the skill. So right here it has perception, and since we don't have any modifiers, it's just 10. Now in D&D 5th edition, 10, or really just D&D in general, 10 is the average roll. A commoner has 10s in everything. 10s in all of their attributes, and they usually don't have trained skills beyond a +2. So that means that basically the best a commoner could have is a 12 in their perception. And so on and so forth. So don't feel too bad if your skills are like really low at the first level. But let's say you have a passive perception of 15 and I have an assassin that's stalking you guys and they roll a 16 for their stealth. Because you're not actively looking for them, you just continue to not see them, and I just won't bring it up. But if another party member has a special piece of equipment that gives them a 19 in their passive perception, I might pull that player aside or otherwise message them saying something like, you hear shuffling of feet that are definitely not your own, you know. Basically let them know that something is following them, because their passive perception, basically just while they're not really paying that much attention, they are still so good at like perceiving their general surroundings, or they're otherwise so used to being in these situations that it's arisen. Okay, so that's all the skills. Below that we have tool proficiencies and custom skills. I mean, there are a number of tools that you can use to craft and do other things in D&D. Where are we at? An hour 7? Okay. But that list is pretty exhaustive, and a lot of them are very, very specific. Just know that more often than not, if you want your character to be good at something that isn't listed here, you can do that. Cooking is a common one that I see a lot of. And there are some rules for it, but, you know, whatever. So, moving over here, we have a Toxin Spell casting. Now, on the physical sheet, you would use this to write down all of your attacking spells and your means to hurt things. So like weapons, spells, items, etc. It would go here. Of course, these sheets are electronic, so they are automatic, and I'll show you the magic of that automation here in a minute. But that's where you would put all of this. Over here, we have class resources. Most classes have unique resources that they can expend in order to do different things. So like bards, they have bardic inspiration. What's another good example? Fighters have action surge or second wind. Barbarians have their barbarian rage. You would keep track of that here. Now, of course, the base character sheet only has 2, but you know, you can add more. We have our equipment and all of your currency, which from top to bottom, we have copper, silver, electrum, gold, and platinum. And we use a very easy counting system for money in D&D. So a copper is essentially $1. Oh, key for monks. Yeah, but whatever. Copper is essentially $1. 10 copper makes 1 silver. 10 silver makes 1 gold. 10 gold makes 1 platinum. But Kagerou, you skipped over electrum. Nobody cares about electrum. Nobody uses electrum. I think 5 silver makes an electrum, and thus 2 electrum make 1 gold, but I like keeping it at tens. 10, 10, 10, 10. It's the easiest way to put it. But yeah, the reason that I brought up that a copper is equivalent to a US dollar is because a lot of things most things in this game cost gold, which is pretty expensive. But, I mean, it helps put things into a little bit of perspective. I see a lot of times in low-level campaigns, a lot of players get frustrated when the GM only awards them with like 20 gold, and it's like, yo, that's like a lifetime savings for a commoner, right? You're low level. The idea is that you save up. So don't expect to be, running through the horde of the Dragon Queen, name drop, on day 1. Electrum is that's what I got. I don't think I've ever used Electrum. Yeah, it's stupid. I've never seen anyone use Electrum, but it's technically there, so I have to talk about it. And over here is the features and traits. Now, if you use Roll20, again, not sponsored, if you use Roll20, this will basically fill itself in. But if you play in games that are run by me, usually I'll give you custom features and abilities, and so you could write them here. And that's the character sheet, at least the very front of it. If we go over here, we have our bio, which again gives us our character name, age, size, which in D&D there are size categories. We have tiny, small, medium, large, huge, gargantuan, and colossal. I think that's what it is. Maybe the last two are swapped. Almost every player character is going to be medium-sized. And the specific height and weight of what a medium of what those size categories are very, very blurred. You can be 5'1" and be a medium creature. You could be 10'2" and be a medium creature. All of the size categories basically just determine how much space you take up on a grid. A medium creature takes up 1 5-foot square. A large creature takes up 4 5-foot squares. A huge creature goes up to 6, and so on and so on. A small creature, on the other hand, takes up half of a 5-foot square. A tiny creature takes up a quarter of a 5-foot square, and so on. You generally don't need to worry about the specifics about all of that stuff. Feel free to make your character, whatever height and weight you really want them to be, as long as it's sensible. You can write out your character appearance, or on the physical sheet you can draw it. You can keep track of the allies and organizations that you team up with. Additional features and traits, for really additional features and traits. For the physical book, this is where you would write a bunch of custom stuff, but whatever. Treasure. Good place to keep all of your equipment if you don't keep it on the equipment window. Character backstory. I actually don't use this. Even though I write out a lot of backstories, I actually like to keep it on the front of the page, but if you have the physical sheet, that's where you could write it. Then we have spells. The short version of this, because I know that it looks complicated, but it isn't. Spells come in spell levels. There's level 0 to level 9. More or less, most casters will get a spell level every 3 levels. So by level 16 or something, you'll be casting 9th level spells, which are super powerful. For the record, the average D&D commoner can't cast beyond 1st level spells. And the most powerful non-monster wizards can only cast to 5th level spells, with some exceptions. And the reason I say non-monster, the way that NPCs have levels tracked in D&D 5th edition is a little different from the way that players have their levels tracked. There's a thing called challenge rating. And a normal, regular human can only get so far in the challenge rating. Weird. Weird is a pretty good spell. But if you give them monster stats, for whatever reason, that allows them to go beyond. That doesn't mean they are a monster, they're just considered a monster because they are so powerful. Named characters such as Mordenkainen, even though Mordenkainen is just a regular freaking wizard, does have monster stats because he's basically a level 20 character. Hold on, checking a few messages. There we go. Okay, so that's the character sheet. What time are we at? 1:15. Okay, so I will briefly go over the classes and some of the backgrounds, and then I will take questions. Let's go to classes. See if this works. No, it doesn't. Does one second. This isn't what I wanted either. PHP. Okay, well, Okay, I know what I'm going to do. Okay, so here's how we're gonna do this. So these are all of the base classes, though there has been one added as of the Eberron book, which when me and the boys are cast. You are playing some beyond 20th level stuff, because that spell is not in 5th edition normally. Do not expect to do stuff like that in my campaigns. So anyway, there is an additional class called the Artificer, which should be up here, but it's not. I do have the Artificer class and the book that it comes in bought on the Roll20 marketplace, but since I'm only looking at a virtual copy of the player's handbook, it's not written here. But we'll go over these classes. We'll talk about Artificer later. So Barbarian is the big beefy boy. 3 bolded B's. Big beefy boy. Barbarians are typically a Viking type of character. They have a mechanic where they get super angry and they start just ignoring pain. Artificer. Don't you mean Artificer? I say Artificer because it's artifact. You know? They're a mancer of artifacts. So Artificer. It doesn't really matter which way you pronounce it, but anyway, Barbarians are big beefy boys. Bird guy. They ignore damage by getting very, very angry. However, there are other ways that you can flavor this. You do not have to be a big, dumb idiot to be a barbarian. I have definitely played with characters who are, say, religiously inspired. They are a totally, normal person, but they are taken over by divine fervor whenever something happens. And there's even a subclass for barbarian called the Zealot that helps you translate that fantasy just right. Other people think of it as like a battle focus. For one reason or another, your character is so into the idea of fighting. Or maybe they are so against the idea of dying that they start like ignoring pain. Barbarians are almost universally frontliners. It is very hard to build a ranged one, though it is technically possible. They benefit from not wearing a lot of armor because a lot of their ability to shrug off pain is, well, to kind of live through that fantasy, you got to get hit. So they don't benefit by a lot of armor, but they do have the highest base HP of any class in the game. So if you like being real healthy and real strong, you want to go and bonk some boys, you're a barbarian. Literally, you're a barbarian. Bard makes me kind of angry. It's one of my favorite classes, but it gets memed on a lot because the meme is that, oh, I rolled to seduce the dragon. That is not what Bard is about. Bards in history, like actual no BS history, are like historians. They are storytellers. And music, while it is a very common part of the Bard's kit, is not really necessary. You can play a bard without having an instrument. You'd probably be a little weird, but it's not uncommon. Again, there's a whole bard college about lore. You're a storyteller. All of your spells are taken from great heroes of Eld and so on and so forth. More or less, a bard is just a performer of a particular kind. Bards do not discriminate between being melee and range. A lot of their spells can deal damage or do utility as well as healing. They are a very just master or jack of all trades, master of a few. They get a few rogue features that lets them be very, very good at a particular set of skills and pretty mediocre at all the other skills. Bard is the only class that allows you to count as proficient even if you normally aren't. Now, the reason that's important is that for a lot of the intelligence-based skills, if you are not proficient in that skill, you just can't roll it. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense for you to understand a complex magical script if you've never learned about magic. So bards can get around that because they count as being proficient in every skill after a certain level. Also, there's a huge meme build that you can do by mixing bard and rogue, where you are proficient with every skill, you are very, very good at more than half of the skills, and you have a few spells on the side. I'm actually playing a character like that. It's the maid that I mentioned before, and it's pretty funny because you just like show up to the party. You're like, yes, I am the NPC that spends an entire episode in an anime explaining everything. So moving on from that, Cleric is more or less a priest or a priestess, but there is a big deal that I want to talk about here. Clerics and Paladins do not necessarily need to be tied to a deity to get their power. It's a very common misconception that they do. And while it is commonly flavored that way, and it's the easiest way to go about it from a storytelling standpoint, there are so many ways to think about it. The easiest way, I would say, to look into something like cleric. Yeah, cleric. You know, have you ever done clerical work? It's a word. That's how you pronounce it. Cleric is not correct. Either way, you can get your powers from just your own faith in something. For example, in Ravnica, there is a Cleric of Unity, or rather, I think it's called the Domain of Unity. But the whole thing is you're like about the common man. You want to help people, and your belief that you can be like a vessel or a beacon of hope for people to look towards you powers your faith. No gods involved. Clerics are most commonly melee, as they do get proficiencies with medium armor, though there are several cleric domains that are all about spellcasting with high damaging holy spells. There are also clerics that are dedicated to healing. I'm sorry, but you're just wrong. I don't think you've been here very long. My opinions are correct and yours aren't. That's just how it goes. That's the rule. So it's just pronounced cleric. Cleric? No, that is incorrect. It's wrong. You're wrong. Moving forward, we get Druid. Druids are interesting. Now, Cleric? Oh god, that's even worse. Wow, you're both wrong. Like, incrementally more wrong. So Druids are your big nature freaks. Though they don't necessarily have to be hippies. They are more or less connected to the world because they understand that the planet, like the physical planet, is itself a living creature. This one does not simply tell Burp he's wrong. Thank you, October. I'm glad you're on the right side here. Maybe I should make you a mod. No. But Druids are more or less connected to the world itself. I'm actually kind of running out of time here. And they are borrowing the power of the planet to sort of restore balance. Though there are Druid circles that are entirely focused on just murdering everything. Ravnica released the Druid circle of Spores, which is a very typically evil circle. I actually heard of a Druid that wore like plate mail. Now, Druids will normally never wear metal armor, and they will try not to use metal weapons. Though technically, The only thing that stops you from doing that is your own character's beliefs. Now, if another druid from another circle recognizes you as a druid and they see you wearing metal, they're going to get real upset. That's almost the easiest way to start in a combat. But when let's play a druid as circle spores, it's too spooky. But either way, the anathema of druids not using metal arms or an armor is a storytelling thing. You do not need to be restricted by that. My favorite druid circle is actually the circle of what is it? Shepherd. Circle of the Shepherd. Because you can summon little animal plushies to help you fight. Also, Circle of the Shepherd is the best healer in the game. You might think Cleric of Life is the best healer in the game, which is partially true. But when it comes to overall healing a whole party, Circle of the Shepherd has them beat. By a pretty decent margin, too. Druids also have the ability to morph into, wild shape into beasts that they are otherwise familiar with, and this is an extremely powerful ability, but for some bizarre reason, they can only do it twice per day up until they hit level 20. I don't quite get it either. There's a whole circle dedicated to this shapeshifting, but it doesn't give you more uses per day. I think it's kind of stupid, but that's the way it is. Now, druids are full spellcasters, as are clerics and bards. And that means that they can go all the way to 9th level. So then we have fighters. Fighters are your extremely basic, adventurer. They wear whatever armor they want to wear. They can use more or less whatever weapons they want to use. They're good. They are in their ass-whooping outfits all the time. You can build a fighter in pretty much any way possible. The only thing is that they don't get magic unless you take the fighter subclass that, gives you magic. D&D 5e druids were pretty stingy with wild shape use. Yeah, but I don't get why the Circle of the Moon, which is hey, you like wild shaping? Yeah, let's make your wild shape super good. But can I get more? No. I don't know. I think it's stupid. Anytime I play with Circle of the Moon druids, I take away some of their power, but I give them more wild shape uses because I think it's just, I think it's obnoxious that they're going to make a subclass about shapeshifting and not give more options for shapeshifting. But yeah, fighters are the bread and butter. I'm gonna beat your ass in 10 different ways. So, I mean, if you want to be the big weapon master, fighter's the way to go. Fighters don't get a bunch of special features like a lot of the other classes do, but their base attributes, the 6 that we looked at over here, get better, faster as a fighter. Then we have monks. Monks are probably, in my opinion, the hardest class to play correctly. I would say that they are probably the strongest class in 5th edition, right next to Paladins. Basically by virtue of you can exploit a lot of the ways the rules are written to do some obnoxious things. Because the key points that monks get allow you to bend the rules of the game in again, pretty obnoxious ways. Though, in my experience, the average monk player does not do these things, so they're not banned from my table. But I do like to keep a close eye on a lot of monks. Paladins, on the other hand, I don't like paladins. I think that they can be very flavorful. I think that there are a lot of very, very cool thematics for paladins. I hate the class. The reason I hate the class is that they have an ability called Divine Smite. Now, paladins are like fighters, except they sacrifice a lot of their natural abilities to get spellcasting, which is pretty cool, except they can choose to totally ignore spellcasting to just deal free damage. And literally, it's free damage. Every other ability in all of D&D 5th edition allows you to buff an attack if you declare that you're buffing an attack before you actually strike. So that way you have to sit there and think, man, do I want to use this super cool ability because if I miss, then I'm screwed and I wasted it. Paladins don't care. They're like, hey, did I just hit that guy super hard? I'm going to hit them even harder. But why? Because I can. And the rules say I can, so I'm gonna. Paladin is something that I'm very, very touchy about. I do not ban them from my table, but if you intend on playing a Paladin at my table, I will absolutely tell you what is not allowed. I do have multiple restrictions for playing Paladins. I also don't like the fact that at level 10, and depending on what Paladin oath you go, they just get free stat boosts for themselves and their party, which stacks with other Paladins. So if you have 4 Paladins in a party, and all of them are built exactly the same way, they will get a +8 on all of their skills and all of their saves all the time forever, as long as they stay within 30 feet of each other. Why? Because that's what D&D said. I don't know. They're basically praised as like the main character of D&D games, and it really, really bothers me from both a storytelling perspective and a mechanics perspective. It's obnoxious. Should I pick Cleric or Cleric? Honestly, I think Clerics are pretty nuts, but there are ways to get around them. So I don't know. I think a Cleric is a really strong class. So right after Paladin, we have Ranger. I'm not... Rangers are supposed to be the go-between of Druids and fighters with like a few rogue abilities. They're supposed to be like the natural survivalist, and they're not very good at it. Ranger is a exceedingly weak class, so much so that Wizards re-released Ranger several times across multiple books. And I still think they're garbage. They can be thematically cool, but honestly, if you want to be a Ranger, play a fighter. Ask your DM if you can go Eldritch Knight and just replace the Wizard spell list with the Ranger spell list, and bam, you are suddenly a more effective Ranger than an actual Ranger. So if you want to play a Ranger at my table, 9 times out of 10, Miyu says I'm wrong on Cleric. Well, that's okay. She can be wrong too. But yeah, Ranger is super memed on. If you want to play it at my table, I will often rewrite all of their abilities to just make them more in line with the rest of the classes. So it's something that we can talk about if you're interested to doing that thematic, but there are a number of other ways to be a Ranger without picking the class. So after Ranger, we have the Rogue. Rogues are all about sneak attacks. You want to be sneaky, you don't want to be spotted, you want to take opportunities away from enemies by just stabbing them super hard. Rogues can be a gigantic meme for one round, and then they're basically useless for the rest of a combat. But what rogues do have that a lot of the previous classes don't, other than the Bard, the Cleric, and sometimes a Paladin, is a lot of social abilities that I feel like a lot of people kind of get over. Rogues are very, very good at a number of skills. They get the most amount of skills of everybody in the game at the very first level, with a total of 8 depending on your background options, your race options, and so on. But they also get to pick a handful of skills that they just double their proficiency bonus at. So that means that the average rogue at level 1 can get a +6 to their stealth instead of the normal +2 like everybody else would get. And let me tell you, having a passive 16 on your stealth will absolutely make you hidden from every monster that you'll encounter at first level. So rogue is a very powerful class, but also requires a good amount of forethought to play. Sorcerer, on the other hand, is a lot of resource management. If you play Sorcerer, prepare to have a little abacus in front of you, because they have the ability to take spells. Swashbuckler. I mean, okay, every class has archetypes that change the way they play. Rogue is no different. Honestly, I can meme on Swashbuckler rogues just as hard as I can meme on Assassin rogues. Swashbuckler does not stay otherwise. You just gotta handle them a little differently. But that's okay. But sorcerers are more or less, they have the ability to take spells and convert them into points. And those points can change how they cast other spells. Also, they can take a surplus of these points and convert them into spells. So it's a lot of they get less spells per level, but they can cast more spells in a given day than any other class. Sort of. And we'll get to that in a minute. Sorcerers have a lot of ways that they can be customized, and because they are flavored to cast based off of their bloodline, which is why I think they should be Constitution casters instead of Charisma, but here we are. You can flavor a ton of different things. You know, wild magic is fun. It is the most useless type of sorcerer. I honestly end up having to rewrite the way that the wild magic chart works, because the gimmick is funny like twice, but it's not really all that interesting. Divine Soul Sorcerer is absolutely like bonkers strong. Draconic Sorcerer is pretty good too, but I think Divine Soul is just the best sorcerer. You get to meme on the GM by saying, hey, did I fail this check? The GM says yes, and then you roll 2d4. No, I didn't. And then the GM says, oh, I guess you didn't. And then you also just get Cleric Spellless. Yeah, wild magic is pretty funny. Hey, I'm gonna cast Fireball. Okay, roll to explode. Oh, man. Okay, so what happened to me? Well, so you go to cast Fireball, but then you turned into a potted plant. And then your party looks at you like, bruh. But why, though? So after Sorcerer, we get Warlock. Warlock is my number one favorite class to play. It is the fighter of spellcasting classes. A lot of people like to call Warlock the, like, dress-up simulator, because Warlocks get the fewest spells out of every class, but they can recharge them faster. And as kind of a sign-on bonus, as it were, Warlocks every other level, from level 2 onwards, well, it's just about every level, or every other level, they get to choose abilities that greatly change the way that they play the whole game. Now, this is in addition to the fact that they get to choose an archetype at level 1, and they get to choose a sub-archetype at level 3. So, basically, by 4th level, if you have a party full of Warlocks, they can be very, very different in both the way that they handle themselves in-game, but also the thematics and the lore. I think Warlock is just a super cool class. And they are also ridiculously strong in conjunction with other spellcasters. Or really just with every other class. A lot of people will tell you that dipping 2 levels into Fighter or Warlock is basically like just good. No matter what class you're playing, you can always benefit to just dump 2 levels into one of those. Or even both of them, if you're willing to dump 4 levels away from your main class. Because the amount of abilities and cool things that you can do with only 2 levels in Warlock or Fighter are immense. Warlocks are, however, supposed to be pretty spooky casters. They get their power from a basically godlike being that doesn't have to be a god. It can be, but it can also be like an eldritch entity. It can be some like super powerful elemental. It can be a devil. It can be a demon. Big difference, by the way. Or it can be a fairy, which is more or less a demon, except that they're real pretty to look at. And then lastly, we have the wizard, which is pretty much like every other wizard. In previous editions, they're really, really smart. They study spellbooks, and they have the ability to take spell scrolls that they find and just doodle them into their spellbooks for later use. This means that by the end of a D&D campaign, the wizard has the most spells, but warlocks have the most abilities, and sorcerers have the most spells that they can just put out. Me about to take the deck of trees as my patron. Funny story, I actually play I currently play in a Legend of Zelda themed 5th edition game. And Jupiter could be a warlock patron. Her power is pizza. But yeah, I played as a warlock, and the Deku Tree was my patron. But yeah, wizards are big spellcasting nerds. And then we have artificers, which aren't listed here, but artificers are more or less crafters that combine crafting with spellcasting. Wizard best class, let's go. Wizards, they're okay. I don't actually think wizards are all that interesting. They're pretty strong if you're good at playing them, but I don't really think that they are new player friendly. Pizza power, yeah, let's go, dude. You can be a warlock packed to the pizza. You know, speaking of wizards, there's an archetype for wizards called the divination wizard, and you know the whole idea is that you peer into a crystal ball. Wait, really, Lamau? I mean, you could. It'd be kind of silly, but I mean, you could. But anyway, you know, divination wizards are all about, you know, divining the celestial heavens by looking into a crystal ball. But me and a buddy thought it would be funny if there was a divination wizard who just worked at a pizza place, and whenever they did their like peer into the future ritual, they're actually just like making a pizza, and then imagine pulling it out of the oven, and like you and your party are gathered around, they're like, and the wizard looks over at his buddy and be like, hey, what kind of pizza did you order? They're like, I got a pepperoni. They look at the pizza, there's sausage on it. Bad omen. Oh, or the pepperonis are all on one side. Ooh, this could be bad, boys. Like, so I mean, you could do something like that. Man, God, I wanted to dedicate at least a half hour to talking about how to reflavor a lot of these classes, but no, the delay made it out of context. I see. So one thing that I will say as we start to wrap up is that D&D is a storytelling game. It is a tabletop role-playing game, and I would really, really hope okay. Let me real talk. The latency is on ultra low. This is ultra low. I can't get much more ultra low. I don't know what to do. So I'll have to look into like what's happening with the output there. So we'll figure that out. Replay buffer, stream. No, okay. Yeah, there is no stream delay. I don't know how that's happening, but well, whatever. I will deal with that at another time. But either way, where was I? Why is it like 40 seconds then? I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But there's a lot of different ways to reflavor D&D classes. So like, for example, you know, if you are a sorcerer and you take dragon, like no, let's choose a better example. Let's say that you're a cleric, and you want to be a Cleric of Life, which is the big healer cleric. But you don't necessarily want to be tied to a god. So maybe the way that I would say it is you prayed super hard somewhere in your backstory, and you decided, or maybe you're like a medic as part of like a group of soldiers, and your squad gets wiped, like totally wiped by maybe like a dragon breath or something, and you pray super hard, and the natural magic in your body just surges, and it creates like a spirit of life, and that spirit is what gives you your power as you grow in your faith and devotion to the very concept of life. That way your cleric is still divine by nature, but isn't tied to like, you know, a god or praying. It's more or less just you just being so into the idea of preserving life. See what I did there? Because that's their ability, preserve life. That you can flavor it differently. The crackhead sorcerer that I play with, you know, she flavors all of her spell casts, like the components and stuff, as being drugs. So whenever she casts fireball, she pulls out a cigarette lighter and then takes a you know, a huff of smoke, and then she spits out the fireball. And you know, it's kind of funny to meme on, But like when you really think about it in terms of thematics, it's like way cooler than just, oh, I point at a thing and it explodes. Now maybe that's your thing, but I guess what I'm getting at is you should really like work with your GM next time you find yourself in a D&D game to focus more on how you do things rather than what the things you do are. Because if you focus on specifically on what the book says you can and can't do, you'll feel really restricted, and it'll bring the whole table down. So now with only a few minutes left, we are going to go back here. I'll close this out. And I will start to wrap up the stream. Now, I said this earlier, but I do intend on running a D&D game. I will be looking into running the pre-made adventure, Tyranny of Dragons, which is a Wizards of the Coast 5th edition adventure that goes from level 1 all the way to level 16. Now, I have a lot of experience with running this, running this module. It's broken down into 2 major parts. The first part is Horde of the Dragon Queen. The second part is The Rise of Tiamat. It focuses on a mixture of social investigation and a lot of dungeon diving. So it's pretty generic on that front, but because I've run the game, or rather, I've played Tyranny of Dragons. Sorry, hold on, let me read this. I'm going to go Cleric Watson with Sasuke as my patron and Naruto as my... You know, I actually thought of a way that's like technically possible. Professor Kage teaching me things. Hey man, that's what I'm here for. But anyway, I have played the Horde of the Dragon Queen module maybe 8 times, and I've run it 3 times. Like 3 of those times I was a GM. I have been a player for the Rise of Tiamat once, and I have GM'd it twice. So I have a good amount of, I definitely know what happens. A lot of people have complaints that the very start of Horde of the Dragon Queen is super hard, and I definitely agree it is. Because it pits you in a fight against like 10 kobolds, all of which can just beat you to death. But because I have so much experience, I like to change the campaign to sort of fit a more reasonable story arc, if that makes sense. Horde Start is good? No, it is not. Remember, Horde of the Dragon Queen is meant for 4 players, not 5, 4. To pit you against 8 kobolds and 2 cultists, all of whom have advantage at level 1, is obnoxiously difficult, because cultists and kobolds are intelligent creatures. They aren't like normal D&D monsters where they just attack the first thing that they see. They will make sure that you are dead. That's like in their tactics. It is not unreasonable. Yeah, I actually have a pretty funny story. I was in one of the times where I was playing Horde of the Dragon Queen, we had this monk player who died in the very first combat, like permadeath, because again, the kobolds beat him to death. Yeah, it's meant for 4 level 1 players. Yeah, it's super difficult. Like the first 2 combats are obnoxiously hard. And then everything kind of after that sort of falls into place. But yeah, we had this monk permadie 3 times in 2 sessions. Because of these 2 combats. And so my character was a paladin, Oath of the Crown. I had a 6 intelligence and 8 wisdom. I was a really dumb drow paladin who was just like, why is it that every fist fighter I meet just dies? And so that was a running joke. But I will be running Tyranny of Dragons. I more or less have the party in mind picked out. So I'm afraid I'm not taking additional players. But if one of them chooses not to play, 6 to 8, yeah. Like with 6 to 8, that makes sense. But it's meant for 4. I usually play with 5, and then I'll have a GM NPC that's level 2 just to get through those 2 combats, and then he's like connected to the big dragon that they meet. So it like helps them get through it, and then it's also like an extra story hook. But yeah, I really like Oath of the Crown. But anyway, I more or less have my players chosen. So if one of them decides that they don't want to play, I will go ahead and keep you guys updated on Discord and Twitter, and we will talk about it to see if maybe we can get something else going. I don't have anything like times or when we'll start specifically, but I have double checked with both Wizards of the Coast and Roll20, and I've been given the okay to stream these things. The thing for me is that I just have to collect background music, and then I need to set up a screen so that everybody who's watching on stream doesn't get to see all of my super GM notes. So that's the last thing I wanted to announce. So now we will go through. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you, Riley. I will put you somewhere in the game. I'll make sure that there's a silver kobold. Actually, you know, in Rives of Tiamat, the party meets a silver dragon. Are you a chromatic white scale dragon, or are you silver? I need to know this. I need to know this. Let me see. What? Silver dragon. Okay, my bad. Okay. What the heck? Why am I not logged in? Okay. And then for this, why are you gonna make me do this every time? There we go. Oof, that latency. Yeah, again, guys, I don't know what's up with latency. I will look into it sometime later. Of course, this week I'm pretty busy trying to make sure I meet all of these streams since it's technically still my debut week. And I want to just make sure that these streams are, you know, fun and interesting enough for all of you guys. So now I'm just checking some messages. Oh. God. All right. Looks like no messages. Remember, you have to set it to ultra low on YouTube's. Okay. Let's open up YouTube right now. Kagerou just went live. Are you kidding me? That guy's crazy. Okay. Buffering. Okay, not super worried about that. Oh, it's saying that my connection is poor. But why though? My internet is super good. It's not like super laggy, is it? I wouldn't think so. Oh no. Okay. All right, I see the issue. Okay. So YouTube, for some reason, set itself to normal latency instead of ultra low, which is in my Streamlabs settings, which, man, that's frustrating. Okay, well, I'll have that fixed by next stream. Thank you for letting me know, Riley, that YouTube will sometimes not cooperate. Oh, that's frustrating. Okay. Well, either way, it's about time to wrap things up. You do not have like. That's excellent. Okay. So, once again, as we have done before, I will go ahead and let you all help me do the outro. So, se no otsukagero. All right. So I look forward to revealing Horde of the Dragon Queen, and later the Rise of Tiamat with our super squad of players. And if you ever have questions about Dungeons & Dragons, or really any kind of tabletop content, I have an entire tabletop RPGs set of chats. So go ahead and feel free to post questions and stuff there. Oh, it's Kagerou, that's adorable. Stop it. All right. I'll see you guys on Thursday for Therapy Thursday. Bye-bye.